Failure is destroying you because you never learned how to build a mental fortress. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire in the world while facing wars, plagues, and betrayals. But he never let failure break his spirit. He developed 8 specific mental exercises that transformed every defeat into fuel for growth. Today, you'll discover these same techniques the Stoics used to become literally immune to the suffering of failure, and how applying them to your modern life can transform you into someone unbreakable in less than 30 days. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from what part of the world you're watching, get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Have you ever wondered why some people seem unshakable, even when everything around them falls apart? The secret for many of them can be traced to something called Stoic philosophy, a way of thinking that was developed more than 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece and Rome. Stoicism isn't just an old-fashioned set of ideas, it is a toolkit for building mental strength and staying calm, especially when life throws failures and setbacks your way. At its center, Stoicism is all about personal virtue, resilience, and using your own rational thinking, even in the middle of chaos, and that's what makes it still so useful today. But how does Stoicism actually help you handle failure in the modern world? To answer that, you have to understand the basics of what Stoicism teaches and why millions of people today are turning to it when stress, loss, or disappointment hits. Let's start with the heart of Stoic thought. The Stoics believed that most of our suffering doesn't come from what happens to us, but rather how we react to those events. In other words, it's not mainly the job loss, the argument with a loved one, or the failure of a business that causes pain. It's our thoughts and judgments about those things that lead to stress and suffering. Epictetus, one of the most famous Stoic teachers, said that it's not events themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. Once you really grasp this idea, you start to see that you have more control over your emotional life than you might have realized. The Stoics saw virtue, things like wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control, as the only true good. Everything else, whether it's riches, health, status, or even comfort, they called indifference. That just means you can prefer them, but you're not supposed to stake your happiness on them. Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor and also one of the most devoted Stoics, ran an entire empire while going through wars, betrayal, illness, and loss. Yet he wrote almost every day about what it means to keep your inner peace no matter what happens externally. His personal writings, which became known as the Meditations, are like a guidebook for how to keep moving forward and growing stronger through hardship, not just in spite of it, but sometimes because of it. From the Stoic perspective, experiencing setbacks, disappointments, or outright failures is just a natural part of life. The important thing is how you respond. The Stoics wouldn't tell you to pretend that nothing bad happened or to ignore your feelings completely. Instead, they encourage a kind of trained emotional response. Acknowledge what has happened, accept what you can't control, and focus your energy on what you can do differently next time. This might sound simple, but practicing it consistently can be life-changing. Nowadays, when life gets stressful, maybe you lose your job, a relationship falls apart, or your plans just don't work out, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. People often go through endless cycles of self-blame, anger, or even despair. The internet is full of quick fixes and motivational quotes, but those rarely get to the root of the problem. Stoicism, in contrast, invites people to go deeper. It provides specific mental exercises and ways of thinking that build real resilience, helping you face disappointments with a clear head and a steady heart. A big part of the Stoic approach is making a clear distinction between what you can actually control and what you can't. Almost every Stoic lesson comes back to this point in some way. You have control over your own thoughts, actions, and basic attitude. You don't have full control over external things like the opinions of others, the economy, the weather, or most other people's behavior. When you focus on what you can control and let the rest be what it is, you can work through life's tough moments without losing your sense of balance or purpose. This doesn't mean you stop caring about other people or what happens in the world. It means you choose to put your energy where it can make a real difference, rather than getting stuck in endless frustration over what cannot be changed. Let's talk more about Marcus Aurelius, because his life makes the case for Stoicism as more than just a bunch of ideas. As emperor, he was hit with constant challenges, wars that threatened to destroy his empire, betrayals from people he trusted, and even the loss of his children. Yet, he chose to lead with a steady hand and a clear mind, writing to himself daily to remember what mattered most. For Marcus, practicing Stoicism wasn't an escape from responsibility. Instead, it was a way of being fully present and effective, especially when circumstances were far from ideal. He acknowledged his fears, doubts, and disappointments, but he didn't let them run the show. This is what Stoicism can offer anyone willing to embrace it, a way to engage with the world fully rather than hiding from failure or pretending it does not exist. The reason Stoicism is coming back into focus today, thousands of years after its birth, is because modern life is challenging, unpredictable, and often anxiety-inducing. Social media, fast-paced careers, ongoing news cycles, and global crises mean most people are exposed to more stressors than ever before. Instead of shutting down or spiraling, people want a way to stay solid on the inside, no matter what's happening outside. That's exactly what the Stoic philosophy is designed to support. Stoicism offers practical techniques to handle stress and setbacks. Modern therapists and leadership coaches often recommend Stoic exercises because they help people deal with anxiety, criticism, rejection, and failure in a realistic, actionable way. Some critics have claimed that Stoicism is about suppressing feelings or becoming emotionally distant. This isn't accurate. Stoics didn't believe in denying or ignoring feelings. They believed in understanding them, putting them in the right perspective, and not letting them become the master of your actions. For Stoics, it is possible to feel disappointed or sad and still act honorably and wisely. It is this capacity that becomes the seed of real resilience. By observing your thoughts, questioning your assumptions, and reminding yourself of what truly matters, you gradually build up a kind of mental immunity to disappointment. This isn't about never feeling bad. It's about being able to take a hit and keep moving forward, knowing deeply that your mindset matters more than most of the events that hit you. A big reason this philosophy sticks around is because it can be used by anyone, anywhere, at any stage of life. Whether you are a student, a struggling artist, a tech CEO, or just someone trying to be a better parent or friend, the core ideas work because they focus squarely on what you do today, no matter what has happened before or what might happen in the future. When you practice Stoic thinking, and this could mean writing out your thoughts, having a quiet moment of reflection, or talking things through with others, you start to notice your reactions more, and you open up space to make different choices. You shift from living on autopilot, reacting automatically to bad news, and instead start meeting each challenge with a little more distance, clarity, and intention. Over the past decade, there has been a noticeable spike in interest around Stoic philosophy among business leaders, athletes, creatives, and anyone facing tough decisions. For example, CEOs like Tim Ferriss and athletes like Tom Brady have openly credited Stoic thinking for helping them manage high pressure, failure, and constant setbacks. They use techniques inspired by ancient Stoic teachers to prepare for loss, disappointment, and uncertainty. Although it was born in a world very different from our own, the foundations of Stoicism translate perfectly into modern lives because the human response to failure hasn't changed very much. People still fear what they cannot control. They get frustrated over criticism or betrayal, and they can feel crushed by a single setback unless they find ways to put things in perspective. That is where Stoicism wins out. It gives you principles to return to, no matter how intense the storms get. The Stoics made a habit, especially in tough situations, of asking themselves basic questions. What is in my control right now? What would be the virtuous thing to do? Am I exaggerating the threat, or can I see this in a different light? These questions aren't complicated, but they are powerful because they draw your attention away from outcomes you can't change and back to the choices you still have. The more you practice this, the more instinctive it becomes, until responding thoughtfully to setbacks is your first reaction, not your last. It's also worth mentioning the mix of optimism and realism that runs through Stoicism. Stoics expected setbacks. They believed misfortune was natural and even necessary. This attitude, expecting things not to go your way sometimes, actually makes you more grateful when things do go right and less panicked or discouraged when they don't. By repeatedly facing difficulties in your mind before they occur, or by carefully analysing your actual setbacks after they happen, you build up a thick skin, emotionally speaking. Instead of feeling that failure is the end of your journey, you start to see it as an ordinary and sometimes useful part of your growth. In practical terms, the relevance of Stoicism is clear every time you meet with rejection, conflict, or plans that fall apart. If you approach these moments with the expectation that life will have rough patches, you are less likely to interpret them as personal disasters and more likely to look for what's useful in the experience. Stoicism teaches that what matters most is not how many times you fall down, but whether you keep applying wisdom and courage even when things don't turn out as you planned. For those who internalize this approach, failure loses its sting, not because it stops hurting, but because it loses the power to define your identity or dictate your future. Modern psychologists have found plenty of evidence that these Stoic techniques work. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which helps millions of people deal with anxiety and depression, is actually based on many of the same ideas the Stoics were talking about centuries ago. It encourages people to question their thinking, separate facts from their interpretations, and act wisely even in painful situations. When you use Stoic ideas in everyday life, you don't just feel better for a moment. You change the way you relate to difficulty over the long haul. The takeaway here is straightforward. If you want to become immune to the emotional devastation of failure, you need a solid foundation for your mind. Stoic philosophy provides this by reminding you over and over that your reaction is more important than circumstance, that virtue is what truly matters, and that no setback has to be the end of your personal story unless you let it. Every time you engage with Stoic ideas, whether by reading, reflecting, or putting their advice to work in the real world, you're building a sort of mental fortress. This is not about closing yourself off to experiences or emotions. It's about being open to whatever comes and handling it with the best part of yourself. If you feel like you struggle with failure, disappointment, or setbacks of any kind, Stoic philosophy is worth exploring. Its insights aren't quick fixes or empty motivational slogans. They are habits of mind and action, developed over lifetimes by people who faced extraordinary adversity and still led with purpose and honor. Each exercise taught by the Stoics is practical and grounded, whether through mental rehearsal, focusing on what's truly under your control, or writing out your thoughts and feelings. Stoicism offers a way to stop being controlled by failure and start using it as fuel for growth. The point is that Stoicism remains relevant because everyone faces periods of loss, failure, or just plain bad luck, whether they want to or not. What you do next is the real test of character, and Stoicism provides you with the tools to meet that test, not with bitterness or denial, but with calm determination and an eye for what you can still make better in yourself and your world. This is why the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and their followers still inspire people from every walk of life. They remind us that you can't choose exactly what happens to you, but you can always choose your next move, and that is where your power lives. As you become more familiar with the Stoic philosophy and its core ideas about handling failure, you'll notice your mindset shifting. You'll catch yourself pausing before reacting in anger or despair. You'll spend less time feeling stuck and more time thinking about solutions, learning from what happened rather than running from it. You'll develop a sense of stability that isn't shaken every time things don't go your way, and this is what gives people a reputation for being unbreakable, even when times are tough. It isn't magic, and it isn't just positive thinking. It's the logical result of training your mind to focus on what matters most and letting go of the rest. Stoicism has lasted this long for a reason. Life hasn't ever been easy, but with the principles and exercises handed down from this tradition, modern people have been able to turn even their toughest moments into opportunities for strength and growth. By integrating these ideas into your daily life, you give yourself a powerful set of tools, not just to survive failure, but to thrive in spite of it, using every setback as one more block in building your own mental fortress. Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, worried about the possibility of something going wrong the next day? That anxious voice in your head, rehearsing worst-case scenarios, might actually be pointing you toward a powerful Stoic exercise known as negative visualization. Although that name might sound a bit off-putting at first, the reality is that this is an old technique that can actually bring more mental clarity, strength, and peace of mind, not less. Once you learn how to use it well, negative visualization starts to turn nervous energy and vague dread into honest preparation and even gratitude for what you currently have. Instead of being a source of constant anxiety, it becomes an intentional practice that strengthens your mind against disappointments, losses, and setbacks, no matter what form they take. To understand how negative visualization works, picture a situation where you imagine something important being taken away. This could be your job, your home, your relationship, or even just your daily routine. Rather than just letting these worries swirl around as aimless fears, the practice encourages you to spend a few minutes clearly picturing what your life would look like if that thing you value were suddenly gone. This isn't about brooding or being pessimistic. It is about becoming familiar with discomfort so that if it ever actually appears, it doesn't seem as shocking. The Stoics believed that a person who is mentally prepared for hardship is more likely to handle it skillfully and less likely to be completely thrown off by it. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most prominent Stoic thinkers and Roman emperors, was known for facing a seemingly endless series of interruptions and challenges in both his personal and public life. Each morning, before stepping into the day, he would reflect on the likelihood that he would be insulted, delayed, misunderstood, or let down in some way. By expecting trouble as a matter of routine, he became less surprised and less frustrated when it actually happened. Negative visualization in this sense is the same sort of habit. Rather than pretending everything will always work out or trying to banish all anxious thoughts, it acknowledges that setbacks are a normal part of life. When you start practicing negative visualization, you can do it almost anywhere, and you don't need much time. Some people take a few minutes before breakfast or before a big meeting. The idea is to think through a scenario where something you care about doesn't go as planned. Maybe a colleague lets you down at work, maybe a project falls through, maybe you face a financial setback. Instead of getting stuck in vague anxiety, you imagine it clearly for a little while. Ask yourself, what exactly would happen if things did not work out? What would I have to do? How would I react? What resources or people could I draw on if this situation actually came to pass? By bringing this kind of scenario to mind consciously, negative visualization helps in two big ways. First, it makes actual setbacks much less intimidating. When something you have already mentally rehearsed actually happens, the edge is taken off. You might still feel disappointed or irritated, but you are less likely to freeze, lose your temper, or fall into despair, because your mind already knows this territory in some sense. Second, this exercise immediately creates a sense of appreciation for what you currently have. The moment you recognize that anything you value could one day be gone, you naturally treat it with more care and attention in the present. Take an example from modern life. Imagine a professional who is worried about losing their job. Without any framework, that worry can become a source of constant distraction and stress, affecting sleep and overall well-being. With negative visualization, that person could spend a few moments honestly thinking about what would happen if they really were let go. They might realize that while painful, they could update their resume, reach out to their network, rely on a partner or friend for support, and eventually find a new position. The real impact is that by facing their fear in a structured way, they become less paralyzed by it and start to see pathways forward that they had not noticed before. Applied regularly, negative visualization can transform the way you respond to disappointment. Let's say you're an athlete and you picture missing an important goal or losing a big competition. Instead of this being a nightmare scenario, you begin to see what lessons might come from it, what strengths you would need to develop, or who you could rely on for encouragement. Or think about parenting. A parent who regularly practices negative visualization might reflect on a child eventually growing up and leaving home, or even misbehaving in a serious way. This does not mean that parent is being callous or gloomy. On the contrary, it helps them savor the present moments more deeply, because they know, on some level, that nothing is guaranteed to last forever. Negative visualization is not just for dramatic, life-altering events. It works just as well for everyday annoyances and frustrations. Imagine your commute being longer than expected, a package getting delayed, or a friend having to cancel plans at the last minute. When you already expect that these kinds of things happen, you spend less energy being annoyed and more energy adapting. The practice smooths out the emotional roller coaster that so many people are on, shifting your reaction from outrage or self-pity to something much closer to balance and resilience. It's common for people to worry that negative visualization will make them more negative or fearful about the future, but the opposite tends to happen. When you make a habit of picturing temporary or permanent loss, the grip of those fears actually weakens. Reality almost never matches the worst-case scenario exactly, and by having already played out a few versions in your mind, it becomes easier to separate genuine danger from things that are merely uncomfortable or inconvenient. In a way, negative visualization works a bit like exposure therapy therapy in psychology. By gently facing the things that scare you, you shrink their power over you. You might wonder when is the best time to use negative visualization and how to balance it with the rest of daily life. The truth is, it can be as formal or informal as you want. Some find it helpful to set aside 2 or 3 minutes in the morning or before an important event. Others do it on the spot, whenever they feel a wave of dread, anger, or self-doubt coming on. By quietly imagining what it would be like if things went badly, you get a mental preview of how you might cope. That's often enough to loosen the grip of anxiety and remind yourself that even worst-case scenarios are rarely as unbearable as they seem. What's interesting about negative visualization is how it overlaps with gratitude practice. The Stoics pointed out that imagining loss or reversal of fortune almost always makes people more appreciative of what they have right now. Instead of taking loved ones, possessions, or opportunities for granted, you remember that nothing is permanent. This slight shift in perspective means you're less likely to get caught up in envy, entitlement, or chronic dissatisfaction. Even during good times, this practice keeps you grounded and reduces the shock when less pleasant times inevitably arrive. There are some misunderstandings out there about how negative visualization should look. Some think it means meditating on disaster all day, growing more and more pessimistic, but that is not at all the Stoic intent. The goal is not to wallow in worries, but to briefly acknowledge life's limits and uncertainties so that you are actually less bothered by them. People who practice negative visualization end up more adaptive, quicker to recover when something does go wrong, and more thankful for all the ordinary moments that would otherwise pass unnoticed. Think about students who fear failing an important exam. If they use negative visualization, they might imagine what really would follow a failure: a conversation with parents or teachers, the discomfort of explaining the grade to friends, the extra work required to recover, and so on. In detailing that possible experience, many students discover that their real fear isn't just about the grade, but about the conversation or the shift in self-image. With this clearer understanding, it becomes much easier to prepare, ask for help, or accept the event for what it is, instead of letting it spiral into a vague, ever-present dread that saps motivation. The same can be applied to relationships. If you are anxious about losing a friendship or suffering a breakup, negative visualization lets you explore those feelings in a controlled way. Maybe you realize that although it would hurt, you would eventually reconnect with other people, grow from the experience, and learn something valuable. This doesn't mean you expect or wish for a loss to happen. It just means that, on some level, you are mentally equipped to keep moving forward, even if it does. In the workplace, leaders who use negative visualization are often better at handling bad news and sudden changes. Before entering a negotiation or launching a project, they might pause to consider everything that could go wrong: delays, budget issues, personnel conflicts. By preparing for setbacks, they build flexibility into their plans, and when the inevitable bumps come, they are ready to shift, adapt, and reassure others. Teams led by people who can do this tend to be calmer and more focused, because everyone knows that setbacks have been thought through and are not the end of the world. There's also a powerful emotional effect that comes from making negative visualization part of your daily routine. The rush of anxiety that accompanies fear of failure begins to shrink. You trust yourself more to handle whatever comes. Even in moments of real loss, the groundwork that you have done makes it easier not to be paralyzed by shock or anger. You become more proactive, ready to look for what can be salvaged rather than getting bogged down by what is gone. This doesn't erase pain, but it provides a framework for action. Some people worry that thinking about loss or failure in advance will somehow jinx them or attract bad luck. Stoic thinkers didn't see it that way at all. To them, reflecting on possible setbacks was just honest preparation and a way to meet life as it is, instead of as you wish it would be. By openly considering the possibility of disappointment, you make yourself less vulnerable to emotional extremes and more capable of seeing both the good and bad in every moment. Another practical benefit of negative visualization is that it can inspire you to improve the parts of your life that are actually under your control. If you spend time imagining a career setback, you might be more motivated to update your skills, save money for emergencies, or build stronger connections with colleagues. If you picture losing touch with a close friend or family member, you might find yourself reaching out more often or being more present when you are together. When you realize that things could change or disappear, the small moments of today start to feel more precious. This technique can also help lighten the pressure of perfectionism. People who expect everything to run smoothly all the time are often crushed by the first sign of trouble. If you regularly make space to imagine small and large mishaps, you stop holding yourself and everyone else to impossible standards. Mistakes and setbacks become just a part of the process, not a crisis or a sign that you are failing at life. Over time, this leads to greater self-compassion, as well as more realistic expectations of other people. It's also important to notice how negative visualization helps you move from automatic emotional reactions to thoughtful responses. While your first instinct might be to complain or feel discouraged, practicing visualization gives you a gap to notice your reaction and choose a better one. By rehearsing mentally, you train your brain to handle similar situations with more calm and confidence. This means less time spent recovering from emotional meltdowns and more energy available for creative problem solving. For people who find themselves stuck ruminating on what-ifs, negative visualization can actually break the hold of these looping thoughts. When you spell out a scenario clearly and without judgment, it loses its power as an undefined terror. You can then ask yourself constructive questions like, what would I do if this happened? And who could help me? By facing these possibilities, you become less likely to get lost in cycles of worry that never lead to action. Over the years, negative visualization has been adopted far beyond its Stoic roots. Athletes, military leaders, emergency responders, and business professionals all use this kind of mental preparation, sometimes without even knowing where it comes from. The effectiveness is always the same. By routinely facing the possibility of setbacks, people become faster at bouncing back and less afraid to take calculated risks. Even for regular folks, this strategy can help with everything from public speaking to traveling in unfamiliar places, changing the emotional script from panic to measured readiness. One thing to keep in mind is that negative visualization works best in moderation. It's about touching, not drowning in, the thought of things going wrong. Just enough time to acknowledge uncertainty and think through your options, then return to the tasks or relationships at hand with a renewed perspective. By regular practice, the technique becomes like a quiet background habit, so automatic that you can use it whenever you feel tension or worry creeping in. Negative visualization is also valuable because it doesn't depend on anyone else's approval or involvement. No one has to know that you are practicing it. There is no ceremony, no extra tools, and no special setting required. Whether you are standing in line, out for a walk, or sitting at your desk, you can quickly run through a scenario and strengthen your mind's ability to cope. Over time, the more you do it, the more natural it feels to pivot from fear to thoughtful planning. This approach starts to have ripple effects in other parts of your life. Relationships often improve because you're less demanding and more present. Work performance often rises because you spend less time in panic and more time on practical solutions. Health can even benefit as chronic stress takes a back seat to measured action. Most importantly, your sense of stability and control grows, not because you are certain bad things will never happen, but because you trust yourself more completely to get through them. It is undeniable that life will include disappointments and that nobody escapes setbacks entirely. The key is not to pretend otherwise, but to prepare for them, to move through them with as much wisdom and resilience as possible. Negative visualization is a practical exercise that allows you to do exactly that. The act of thinking through loss or failure, even just for a short time, creates durable, adaptable confidence that no amount of wishful thinking can provide. What sets this practice apart from ordinary worrying is the sense of movement and agency it brings. Rather than being stuck in a loop of fear, you gain clarity on both the potential pain and the path forward. You train your mind to stay open, flexible, and responsive. This is not about resignation or defeat, but about developing a realistic, empowered stance in the face of an unpredictable world. If you decide to start practicing negative visualization, keep it simple at the beginning. Spend a few minutes during a quiet part of your day. Pick something specific to imagine losing or failing at. Let yourself feel what that would mean, and then reflect on the steps you would take next. Afterward, notice the effect it has on your mood and perspective. Most people find they feel lighter, less fearful, and more grateful. Over time, this leads to a mind that can weather even the toughest times without falling apart, and that's a powerful skill in today's ever-changing world. There is a lot to be gained from consistently making space for this ancient but timely exercise. Mental preparation, gratitude, thicker emotional skin, and steadier relationships all flow from the regular use of negative visualization. Above all, it gives you the confidence not just to hope for the best, but to quietly know you are ready for whatever life brings, good, bad, or something in between. And while it may sound counterintuitive, this simple daily mental rehearsal can make all the difference when actual setbacks arise, helping you keep your head, find hidden opportunities, and keep moving forward even when things do not go according to plan. All of this mental preparation really lays the groundwork for dealing with setbacks and uncertainty in a much more balanced way. However, there's another key Stoic exercise that goes hand in hand with anticipating difficulties, focusing only on what you can genuinely influence and letting go of what you can't. This idea is usually called the dichotomy of control. It basically means you learn to separate everything that happens into two broad categories: what is up to you and what simply isn't. When you start to look at life through this lens, you discover that most of your stress, disappointment, and even anger comes from putting a lot of mental energy into things that are totally beyond your reach. The first step in actually applying the dichotomy of control is to start paying close attention to things as they come up in your day-to-day life. Say you're stuck in traffic and running late for an important meeting. In that moment, most people get frustrated, some feel helpless, and others blame themselves for not leaving earlier. But if you step back and ask yourself a simple question, what part of this situation is truly up to me right now? The answer suddenly becomes clear. You can't control the traffic, you can't control whether there's an accident blocking the road, and you can't magically make the meeting wait for you, but you absolutely can control how you react as you sit there. You can choose to focus on breathing calmly, alert your colleagues you'll be late, or use the time to think through your agenda. That might sound simple, but it makes the difference between letting a bad situation ruin your mood and keeping your head in the game. This mindset stretches to bigger issues too. If you're waiting for the results of a job interview, you cannot influence the decision anymore once the interview is over. Worrying endlessly won't change the outcome, and replaying the conversation hundreds of times in your mind won't guarantee anything. All you can do is accept that you prepared as best you could and focus on how you'll respond if the answer is yes or no. This kind of thinking isn't about giving up or being passive. It's about recognizing the exact point where your influence stops and your acceptance needs to begin. The more time you spend distinguishing between what's within your power and what isn't, the more mental strength you build. Most people are shocked to see how much of their daily rumination, anxiety, and conflict is actually about things they have no power to change. A big part of putting this into practice is learning to reassign your focus. Instead of investing all your emotional energy into outcomes, you invest it into actions and responses. Imagine working on a team project where everyone's roles are clearly defined. You cannot control whether every single person pulls their weight or what your boss will think of the finished product, but you can take responsibility for your part. You can check your work, help out someone who's struggling, ask good questions and suggest improvements. By doing so, you walk away knowing you did everything that was within your reach. Whatever happens with the group's performance, your own sense of progress grows from things you could influence, not from unpredictable results or unfair judgments. Now, it might seem obvious that you should focus on what you can change, but everyday life pulls people in the opposite direction all the time. Think for a second about how often you get frustrated by the weather, traffic, other people's opinions, or sudden company policies at work. None of these are within your control. When you invest hours complaining or feeling defeated by them, all you're really doing is draining yourself. If you start each morning with a mental note about the kinds of things you'll likely face, and get very honest with yourself about which ones are up to you, daily stress can drop almost immediately. This approach also brings a big sense of relief to stressful situations. For example, when you get criticism at work or online, it can sting. If you become wrapped up in defending yourself or obsess about how people see you, nothing really improves. But if you take a step back and ask what's actually up to you, a new path opens. You might review your work to see if any of the criticism is useful, or you might politely clarify any misunderstandings. But at a certain point, you recognize that you just cannot force everyone to like you or see your intentions the way you wish. You let go of unnecessary battles and direct your energy toward refining what you do have control over. A really interesting effect of practicing the dichotomy of control over time is that you start to notice chances for real empowerment. If you're someone who often feels stuck or powerless, this exercise starts to highlight dozens of small places where you actually do have choices every day, from how you react to setbacks, to how consistent you are with your routines, it turns out there's a lot more within your grasp than you might have thought. This realization has a snowball effect. Each time you successfully focus on your contribution and not the outcome, you become even more adept at handling bigger challenges down the line. There's always the worry that if you let go of striving to control everything, then you'll lose your edge or not care enough. But in most real cases, what actually happens is that you care more about quality and improvement where it counts: your words, your actions, your thought process. Athletes experience this when they work hard in training, understanding that the weather conditions or a referee's call are out of their hands. Musicians know it when they play or sing as best they can, even if the acoustics or audience aren't in their favor. Professionals encounter it when they send out job applications. They can only craft the best resume and cover letter, but beyond that, it is up to the decision makers. It's a kind of rational optimism, not passivity. If you're wondering how to get better at this, the first step is just to slow down your thinking. The next time you feel overwhelmed or defeated, instead of spiraling, pause for a moment and mentally sort what you're facing into two buckets: things you can shape directly and things that just have to be accepted as given right now. You can even write this divide down if it helps. Every time you catch yourself worrying about something over which you have zero say, like a global event, someone else's mistake, or the way others talk about you, you train yourself to put down that mental burden. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're redirecting your efforts to the things that build momentum in your own life. When Marcus Aurelius dealt with famine, war, or plagues, he repeatedly reminded himself that he couldn't control external circumstances, but he could always control his judgment, his decisions, and the effort he put forth every day. In his meditations, you can catch him coaching himself through disappointment and chaos, always narrowing his focus back to his own choices and responses. That's the same basic attitude that anyone today can practice. Even if the stakes are nowhere near as high as running an entire empire, it's important to remember that this isn't about lowering your standards or expecting nothing from anyone. It's about clarity. When you see what's in your hands and what's not, your daily life becomes less about brick walls and more about doorways for possibility. For something like a difficult conversation with a loved one, you can't make them agree with you or act a certain way, but you can communicate clearly, set your boundaries, and listen. If it doesn't go as you hope, you let go of the outcome and return to what you can work on yourself. Over time, this teaches not just patience, but a quiet kind of confidence. In moments of crisis, this practice can be especially grounding. If you experience a sudden financial setback, it's easy to feel helpless. However, recognizing the difference between what you can and can't change helps you direct your efforts toward building a plan, seeking support, or adjusting your habits. It won't erase the challenge, but it gives you back a sense of agency, however small, and often that's enough to begin recovering. There are days when the dichotomy of control feels almost like a form of emotional first aid. When emotions start spiking, anger, anxiety, sorrow, it's a sign you're probably wrestling with something that's not in your hands. By stopping and breaking down what's happening, you stop carrying extra weight. Sometimes it means accepting a situation. Sometimes it means making a plan. Either way, the process itself is calming. When you stick with this practice, your relationships often improve. You don't get as wrapped up in trying to manage people's reactions or control their decisions. Friends or family members notice that you're less reactive, less judgmental, and more encouraging of their independence. Letting other people be responsible for their own choices creates space for trust and respect, qualities that make every kind of relationship stronger and steadier. There are even long-term effects worth mentioning. People who grasp this idea early in life often take more risks where it counts because their self-worth isn't anchored to outcomes they can't guarantee. They try new things, share their ideas more freely, and accept that mistakes and failures are part of the process, not a reflection of their whole identity. This increase in resilience means that every failure becomes a lesson to use for growth, not proof that you should have tried to control more. The practical applications of the dichotomy of control show up in every corner of life. At work, you might be tackling a group project with shifting deadlines and mixed feedback. At home, you might be managing family dynamics or a tight budget. In both places, you can't dictate every twist and turn, but you can determine your own standards, your persistence, and your reaction to temporary setbacks. Even outside of work and home, like when you're participating in a sport, volunteering, or learning something new, the formula is the same. As you get more skilled at this, you start to let go of lingering regret. So often people replay old choices, wishing they could have done more or said things differently. While it's useful to learn from the past, it's important to remember that you did what you could with what you knew at the time. The present moment always contains your best opportunity for improvement, and the dichotomy of control returns your attention there, where your time and energy matter most. This doesn't mean you never feel bothered by setbacks again, but the bounce back is so much quicker. You waste less energy arguing with reality and more energy designing useful responses. Most people find they have more patience for themselves and others, which over time creates all kinds of small wins that add up. It can take a while for this way of thinking to feel automatic. You might slip up or get swept away in worries about what people think or what could go wrong. But with practice, the question, "Is this up to me?" becomes a quiet anchor in your daily life. You start noticing when your thoughts are spinning on things you can't influence and gently nudge yourself to focus on the next useful step. Across all cultures and professions, you'll find that people respected for their calm and resilience usually have some grasp of this practice. Whether instinctive or learned, they keep their focus on their own actions, thoughts, and intentions, not the chaos around them. It's a steady, humble approach to the world. Even when circumstances are hard, people who use the dichotomy of control come off as grounded, practical, and less weighed down by frustration with the unpredictable. Maintaining this focus can even support your mental health. So much stress and sadness come from feeling like you have to carry everything on your own shoulders. When you regularly draw the line in your mind between what is and isn't yours to change, you experience a kind of emotional relief. This clarity creates more space for creativity, joy, and curiosity because your attention isn't diluted by fruitless worry. If you cultivate this as a skill, you'll probably find that your life feels less suffocating and more workable, even when things get rough. Instead of obsessing over everything you don't control, your circle of influence becomes stronger and more productive. Every day becomes another chance to focus where your actions truly make a difference, and over time, that's what builds a reputation for steadiness in the face of adversity. This way of operating also helps when you're trying for big changes or pursuing meaningful goals. The world is simply too vast and unpredictable for any one person to master. Realizing this isn't discouraging, it's actually empowering. You can stop beating yourself up for things beyond your reach, and instead use your time and skills to build habits, relationships, and results that matter over the long term. A life lived with this attitude doesn't free you from problems, but it does free you from wasting energy on things pointless to fight with. The dichotomy of control brings your attention to the real levers of progress. When faced with difficult news, shifting expectations, or disappointment, you notice the urge to control what you can't and gently return to the next step you can take. It's a subtle but powerful shift that makes every setback less personal and every opportunity for action more obvious. With time and practice, focusing only on what you can influence will make facing challenges less of an ordeal and more of a routine part of moving forward, even in an unpredictable world. When you start to focus on what you can actually influence, something interesting happens. You find that your strength to deal with setbacks and tough circumstances really grows. Yet even with this active mindset, the reality is that difficult moments are always a part of life. And the comfort of the familiar can make most people hesitant to step into anything that seems uncomfortable by choice. But there's another classic Stoic approach that adds an important dimension to this mental training, which is all about seeking voluntary discomfort. Instead of waiting for hardship to arrive and hoping you can handle it, this exercise is about training yourself with small, intentional challenges so that when real difficulties appear, they don't come as a complete shock. Choosing discomfort sounds counterintuitive in a culture where almost everything is designed for convenience, but the benefits are real and practical. The idea here is not to send yourself into suffering or harm. Instead, it's about exposing yourself to manageable, controlled situations that feel a bit uncomfortable or even slightly annoying. For example, you might occasionally take a cold shower, walk somewhere instead of driving even if it's inconvenient, skip a meal now and then, or intentionally do a task you dislike without looking for ways to make it easier. These aren't huge sacrifices, but they do introduce a dose of inconvenience or challenge that tests your ability to stay calm, patient, and in control when things don't go your way. This voluntary practice does a couple of things at once. First, it weakens your reliance on comfort, which can quietly become a major source of anxiety if you always avoid anything unpleasant. If you only ever experience smooth sailing, even tiny disruptions like a missed coffee or a crowded bus can feel unbearable. But when you choose discomfort on your own terms, you notice that you are more adaptable. The everyday ups and downs don't upset you so quickly, and new, bigger challenges don't seem so out of reach. With every little moment of voluntary hardship, you're teaching your mind not to be surprised by inconvenience or pain, and this is a surprisingly effective way to prepare for larger setbacks. Another benefit is that voluntary discomfort strengthens your grit and patience. It shows you that you can survive being hungry for a few hours, feeling cold for a minute, or going without some small pleasure. Over time, these experiences pile up and act as reminders of your own resilience. When something happens that is out of your control, like a cancelled flight, a rough night's sleep, or a workload that won't quit, you already have a collection of memories where you chose to deal with discomfort and came out the other side just fine. It doesn't completely erase the difficulty of facing adversity, but it makes it much more familiar. There's a form of freedom that comes with this exercise. When you are no longer ruled by the desire to stay comfortable at all times, you become more willing to take risks, try new things, or step into unknown territory when it matters. Comfort has its place, but too much of it can create a false sense of security. As soon as something unexpected or challenging arises, you may feel exposed, anxious, or completely lost if you've never practiced handling discomfort. The Stoics saw this a long time ago. They wrote about wearing simple clothes even when they could afford luxury, eating plain food instead of feasts, and fasting for a day here and there to remind themselves how little a person actually needs to be okay. For them, the point was never to reject pleasure or comfort entirely, but to make sure they weren't dependent on it. This practice applies to modern situations just as much as to the ancient world. Every time you face a tough project at work, a difficult conversation, or a stressful event, your previous experience with mild discomfort adds up. Say you have to give a presentation and you're nervous. If you're used to regularly choosing discomfort in small ways, your nerves don't take over as easily. Or maybe you're having a day where everything seems to be stacking up against you. Technical problems, unfriendly service staff, bad weather. When your tolerance for discomfort is higher, these moments feel more like bumps in the road than giant obstacles. For those who train, whether in physical sports, music, or academics, voluntary discomfort is almost a hidden secret. Athletes train through soreness and bad conditions not just to get stronger physically, but because they learn that their mind is capable of accepting discomfort and continuing anyway. Musicians might play for hours, even when bored or tired, knowing that skill comes from perseverance. People who learn new languages or master difficult tasks also discover that the point where things start to feel uncomfortable is the exact space where real progress is happening. There is sometimes a concern that seeking voluntary discomfort could lead someone to extremes, going too far, stretching yourself thin, or making a show out of enduring pain. The key is to use your judgment and common sense. There's no need to make yourself miserable or to turn this practice into a competition. The point is to gently expand your boundaries, not to punish yourself. You just want to break out of the trap where you organize your choices only around what feels easiest or most pleasant. Adopting voluntary discomfort can help with common problems like procrastination and hesitation. If you're the kind of person who has trouble getting started because something feels awkward or uncomfortable at first, this mental training builds up your resistance to those excuses. The more you practice tolerating mild discomfort, the less likely you are to quit early or avoid opportunities because of fear. You do the thing that needs doing and put up with the awkwardness with less drama or avoidance. One of the side effects of practicing voluntary discomfort is discovering new strengths and preferences you didn't expect. If you take the stairs instead of the elevator for a week, you might realize you like the extra movement or the challenge. If you hold off on checking your phone every few minutes, you might notice your focus or creativity improving. Sometimes just giving yourself permission to do the harder thing can gently shift your day in a different direction, one that you find surprisingly satisfying. There's a psychological shift that shows up once you start including voluntary discomfort as part of your routine. Whenever something unexpected pops up, maybe a missed deadline, a disappointment, or a hard physical challenge, you're much less likely to react with panic or self-pity. Your mind has a library of recent experiences to pull from, moments when you controlled the urge to quit, looked past the discomfort, and finished what you set out to do. This doesn't mean you never feel annoyed or discouraged, but the intensity and duration of the emotional spiral often drops a lot. People from all walks of life can use this practice. Students stay up late to finish assignments even when they want sleep. Parents remain calm after a tough day at work. Delivery drivers deal with weather and traffic. Medical professionals pull long shifts during emergencies. The shared element is a willingness to do something they'd rather avoid, not because someone told them to, but because they know that accepting discomfort in the short term can serve a better purpose, whether it's meeting a deadline or helping someone else. As voluntary discomfort becomes a habit, you might start to design small challenges for yourself. Maybe that means skipping an unnecessary purchase, being okay with some silence instead of filling every gap with noise, or choosing to carry groceries instead of using a cart for short distances. Each time you do something a bit inconvenient or tough, you send yourself a message. You're not afraid of a little struggle and you think you can handle whatever comes your way. These signals add up until pretty soon the idea of discomfort doesn't feel so threatening. This practice can even change how you approach bigger life events. In times of grief, loss, or failure, voluntary discomfort becomes an anchor. You know, from experience, that you can sit with feelings that aren't pleasant, you can get through difficult days, and you don't have to collapse at the first sign of pain or inconvenience. This doesn't minimize the hardship, but it gives you a sturdier foundation to move forward and recover. People sometimes notice that their appreciation for good things increases too. When you embrace occasional discomfort by choice, the pleasant moments, good food, warm beds, kind words, stand out more clearly. You don't take them for granted in quite the same way, because you've reminded yourself through experience that comfort is not a given, but a bonus. Another way this practice can come in handy is when you feel life is becoming a bit too predictable or routine. By shaking things up intentionally with small doses of voluntary discomfort, you keep yourself open to growth. Trying new things, even when they're not immediately rewarding or comfortable, pushes your skills and confidence in directions you might not have considered before. If you're interested in making voluntary discomfort a regular practice, you don't have to jump into anything major right away. Sometimes the simplest exercises are best. Skipping a small luxury now and then, delaying gratification for a short period, or tackling a task you've been putting off because it seems too dull or unpleasant. Over days and weeks, these mini challenges build up endurance and resilience like almost nothing else. This exercise also reveals the connection between emotional and physical discomfort. Often, learning to handle a little irritation or frustration from your thoughts, feelings, or surroundings teaches you a lot about staying steady under pressure. If you can sit with a craving or an itch to check your messages and let it pass on its own, you start building a kind of muscle that makes the bigger stuff. Conflict, rejection, even big disappointments, a little less overwhelming. Plenty of people who try this approach notice changes in how they relate to anxiety and anticipation. Before, maybe the thought of an uncomfortable situation would cause days of worry or avoidance. But after some practice, it feels more normal to step into things you'd rather skip, using that experience as fuel for growth rather than a cue to back off. The anticipation shrinks, and you spend more time taking action instead of worrying about discomfort before it even appears. The biggest shifts might show up in stressful moments when everything seems out of your control. If you've made voluntary discomfort a habit, you're familiar with the edge of irritation, tiredness, or stress, and it becomes just one more thing you know how to move through. The power comes not from ignoring discomfort, but from handling it intentionally on your own terms long before circumstances force it on you. Eventually, you get to know yourself better, the limits you can push, the temptations you can resist, and the hidden reserves of strength you might not have noticed otherwise. You get comfortable with not always being comfortable, and that turns out to be a huge asset in a world where change and challenge are unavoidable. Overall, adding voluntary discomfort into your daily life is not about seeking out suffering or denying yourself every pleasure. It's about putting yourself in situations, big or small, that stretch you just outside your favorite chair, so to speak. With every small choice to welcome discomfort, you remind yourself that you're more than your cravings and habits. You get ready for difficulties before they arrive, and when they do, you meet them not with shock, but with the calm of someone who has already been through smaller storms and come out the other side. And in the end, that kind of training makes real setbacks seem less like threats and more like the next thing you know you're ready to face. Over time, these small habits of stepping into discomfort create a stronger, steadier mindset that prepares you for whatever surprises life throws at you. But once you've faced hardships, setbacks, or pushed your own limits at work or at home, there's another skill that can help you keep making progress and avoid getting stuck in the cycle of regret or negative emotions. That skill is regular journaling and honest reflection. While it might sound a bit simple, taking time to write down your thoughts, your actions, and even your failures has been a powerful tool used for centuries, including by the Stoics, to turn mistakes into valuable lessons and keep moving forward. Journaling is not just about venting or recording your day. It's really about understanding how you respond to difficult moments and learning from them. Imagine you just made a big mistake at your job, or you lost your temper in a conversation. Instead of pretending nothing happened or beating yourself up for hours, you sit down with a notebook at the end of the day, write out exactly what happened, how it made you feel, and what you think you could try differently next time. This doesn't instantly erase the pain, but it changes the failure from something abstract and embarrassing into something you can unpack and look at directly. The Stoics believed that a huge part of growing as a person came down to honest self-examination. Marcus Aurelius, for example, wrote what are now called his Meditations, not as a book for others, but as a private diary where he sorted through his own reactions, doubts, frustrations, and efforts to live well. What stands out in those writings is the steady effort to learn from small setbacks instead of hiding from them. When you get in the habit of doing this yourself, you take control back from feelings like shame, anger, or sadness. Instead, you start approaching failure the way a good coach or supportive friend would, by looking for the next step forward, rather than just assigning blame. Even if you don't consider yourself a writer, journaling can work for you. You don't need fancy language or perfect spelling. The point is to get down on paper a real account of what you experienced, what went through your mind and body as things happened, and how you responded. Some people use just a few sentences each evening or after something big happens. Others fill entire pages. Over time, these records help you notice patterns in your behavior, times when you repeat the same mistakes, get stuck in the same negative thought loops, or forget to use the tools you know you have. You can see what triggered certain reactions, what helped you recover faster, and what led to progress even after a setback. One of the biggest advantages of regular reflection through writing is that it creates critical distance between you and your mistakes. When something goes wrong, it's easy to get caught up in the moment, where emotions are running high and your perspective shrinks. But when you write after the fact, your thoughts slow down, emotions cool off, and you can look at what happened almost as if it happened to someone else. This space is where learning happens. You see new angles, possible reasons for your actions, and other options you might try in the future. It's much easier in that moment to remind yourself that mistakes don't define you. They're just part of the process of living and growing. Another reason why journaling is so useful after failure is that it stops negative experiences from growing larger and scarier in your imagination. If you've ever had a minor embarrassment or error nag at you for hours or weeks, you know how a small failure can turn into a big monster in your head when you don't face it directly. Putting your thoughts on paper, or even typing them in a basic document, forces you to slow down and really examine what happened. Most of the time, this process shrinks the problem back down to its real size, and you see that you survived, learned something, and can try again. As you keep up this habit, you also start to see just how many setbacks you've already endured and overcome, even if they felt huge in the moment. Looking back through older entries, you'll notice patterns in how often initial failure turned out to be the first step in some kind of new opportunity. What seemed catastrophic at the time might now just look like a learning moment or a turning point that led you somewhere better. This ongoing record builds a quiet sort of confidence that you can get through much more than you thought. Some people like to structure their journaling with a few guiding questions. For example, what went wrong today? How did I respond? What did I feel at the time? What choices did I make afterward? What, looking back, would I want to try differently in the same situation? These aren't rules, just prompts to help you get under the surface and avoid repeating the same mistakes. With just a few honest answers, you bring some order to your thoughts, and you start seeing every error as information for future progress, rather than just something to regret. There's also plenty of psychological research showing that writing about painful or stressful experiences actually reduces the intensity of those emotions. The act of writing helps structure and organize chaotic thoughts, which makes them less overwhelming. It also introduces a kind of objectivity. Your private failures and doubts turn into data instead of just feelings. Over time, you'll notice that you recover from embarrassment, disappointment, and even anxiety much faster when you use writing to help process intimidating events. This process is different from merely replaying negative moments in your head. Rumination, which is basically turning an event over and over without moving forward, usually just makes you feel worse. Journaling, by contrast, pushes you toward clarity and action. You're not just re-experiencing the moment, you're identifying what you can control now and what you can let go. That small act can stop a bad day from bleeding into the next one and helps you break long-standing cycles of regret or avoidance. In addition to writing out problems, plenty of people use their journals to track progress and victories, even if they're small. Not every journal entry has to be about what went wrong. Tracking your efforts to try something different, your moments of choosing patience or honesty, or examples where you surprised yourself with resilience is just as important. These notes become a resource when doubt shows up again. They remind you what's possible and how much growth is possible even after setbacks. Journaling is also useful in relationships. After a disagreement or misunderstanding, writing out what happened lets you see the dynamic with fresh eyes. Maybe you overreacted, maybe you ignored a warning sign, maybe you misread someone else's feelings. By sorting this out on the page, you often spot more constructive ways to communicate in the future. This is how honest reflection builds stronger connections, with family, at work, and among friends, because you become a little better at breaking negative cycles before they harden into habits. A big part of the value in this practice comes from consistency. You don't have to write for an hour every day or keep a perfect streak. The more regular you are, especially when things don't go well, the clearer it becomes that your failures are just one part of your overall story. After even a few months, you may spot patterns that reveal exactly where you struggle or where you shine under pressure. Journaling can be especially powerful after major setbacks. Say you lose a job, face rejection in a personal relationship, or miss out on an important opportunity. It can be tempting to hide from these feelings, distract yourself, or numb the pain. But sitting down and writing honestly about what happened, how it felt, what thoughts spiral through your head, and what might come next is a first step in moving the pain out of the shadows. With time, you're able to focus less on the sting of the loss and more on what can be learned from it. Sometimes just seeing your thoughts in black and white makes planning a new direction much less daunting. Including reflection in your routine doesn't mean you'll never feel embarrassed, disappointed, or lost again. It just means that these feelings don't have to define your day or shape your self-image for weeks or months. By giving yourself permission to make mistakes and then actually studying what they can teach you, you're building a healthy distance between yourself and the idea of failure. Criticism, whether it comes from outside or from your own mind, loses some of its sting when it's placed in a larger context of effort and learning. Some people find that sharing parts of their journal or reflection process with others helps normalize failure and make growth more collaborative. Maybe you discuss your thoughts with a trusted friend, therapist, or coach, or maybe you keep them private. Either way, the act of sorting through your reactions and considering new approaches can influence both your outlook and your behavior. Over time, this habit makes you more open to feedback, better at handling disappointment, and more likely to actually learn from real life, not just in theory. There's no right way to reflect or journal. Some people prefer typing, others like old-fashioned pen and paper. Some use lists, charts, or free-form sentences. The most important part is being honest and curious, noticing what's under the surface even or especially when it's hard to look. With consistent effort, journaling and reflection become less of a chore and more like a source of guidance and encouragement. For those who struggle with perfectionism or a harsh inner critic, this practice is especially useful. When you start recording not just your failures, but also your effort and improvement, you train your mind to look for growth rather than just mistakes. Setbacks are no longer evidence that you are not good enough. They just become part of the normal cycle of learning. By seeing both your struggles and progress in one place, you anchor yourself in a wider, more accurate view of your own capacity. There's also a benefit to journaling when things are going well. If you note what led up to a positive outcome, how you handled stress before something succeeded, or what mental habits helped you bounce back, you give yourself a toolkit for the next round of obstacles. Often, we remember failures much more vividly than successes. By building a record of both, you keep your perspective grounded and your attitude closer to balance. Reflection after setbacks can also reduce the sting of harsh criticism, whether it's self-imposed or comes from others. By reviewing the feedback in writing and sorting through what's useful and what's not, you choose what to accept and what to let go. Over time, you develop a thicker skin for external judgments, and you get more skillful at self-evaluation too. This is a crucial part of not crumbling in the face of failure, criticism, or misunderstanding. It's crucial to note that none of this is about denying pain, disappointment, or frustration. Honest reflection actually makes room for whatever you're feeling, so those feelings don't build up into bigger problems or come out sideways. By letting emotions exist on the page, you process them instead of suppressing them. That difference means less festering pain and more room for solutions, new ideas, and future confidence. If you want to get started with this practice, just keep it simple and doable. Write for 5 or 10 minutes right after something happens, or set aside a regular time at the end of the day or week. Make it private and for your eyes only if you need to. Let yourself be messy, contradictory, hopeful, or frustrated. Whatever matches what you're feeling. The benefits will show up gradually, not overnight, but with consistency, the process starts to change how you handle mistakes. As you do this more often, it's common to notice that you bounce back from setbacks with much more energy and optimism. Instead of feeling stuck in negative cycles, you create a steady sense that everything, good or bad, can be shaped into some kind of lesson or starting point. That ongoing record becomes a foundation of resilience, as well as a measure of just how far you've come by sticking with it. There's so much psychological strength in being honest with yourself on paper. Over weeks, months, and years, you end up with a detailed map of where you struggled, adapted, and eventually got better. Looking back, you see that very few failures are the end of the story. Almost all of them become building blocks for something else. That's the subtle but steady power of journaling and reflection, a private but effective tool for turning mistakes into steps forward, and for growing a mental foundation that really can handle whatever comes next. Writing and reflecting on past experiences gives you the kind of self-understanding that makes each new setback less intimidating, but sometimes, even with these stronger habits, problems can feel overwhelming when you are caught right in the middle of them. This is where another practical Stoic exercise comes in handy, seeing things from above, also known as the view from above. It's a technique about changing your perspective, not running away from your current challenges, but learning how to put them in a much larger context so they stop feeling so consuming. The view from above is pretty straightforward. When you catch yourself caught up in disappointment, anger, or frustration, you pause and mentally rise above the situation. Instead of just seeing things from your own narrow vantage point, you try to picture the bigger picture. It could be as simple as imagining your life from a few years ahead, or as wide as picturing your city, your country, or even the whole planet, and realizing how small today's crisis really is compared to the whole sweep of time and humanity. This is not about dismissing what you're going through as unimportant. Instead, it lets you see that setbacks and failures, though painful, are almost always just temporary events inside a much bigger story. For most people, problems feel gigantic for a very simple reason. When you are inside them, they fill up your mental space. Your worries and pain take up all your attention, and it becomes tough to see anything else or imagine that things could ever get better. Practicing the view from above helps break this mental tunnel vision. With some practice, even during tough times, you can step back in your mind and take a look at how this one bad day, one project gone wrong, or one awkward conversation fits into the bigger picture of your life. Things that once seemed overwhelming become more manageable when you see them as just one part in a chain of many experiences, both good and bad. One nice thing about this exercise is that you can practice it almost anywhere. The next time you're stuck in a tricky situation, maybe waiting for feedback, feeling like you let someone down, or worrying about the future, just pause and mentally zoom out as if you were looking down from above. Picture the world continuing to turn, thousands or millions of other people waking up, going to work, or having their own small victories and failures. You can imagine your neighborhood and then your city and keep expanding the view. The point isn't to minimize your own trouble, but to remember that there is a larger world where this problem is only one small part. A lot of people find relief when they realize that most setbacks are not going to be remembered in a month, a year, or a decade. If you look back, you'll probably notice that some of the events that once took up all your emotional energy, maybe a fight with a friend, a bad grade, or a missed opportunity, barely cross your mind anymore. In the heat of the moment, they seemed all important, yet with just a bit of time and distance, they faded into the background. Practicing this kind of perspective shift before you have the benefit of time trains your brain to get through even big disappointments without losing your sense of self. Marcus Aurelius was famous for using this mental exercise, especially when running into setbacks as emperor. He would remind himself that everything from natural disasters to public arguments to personal betrayals had happened to countless people before him, and would happen again after he was gone. He looked at his own struggles not just as private headaches, but as a recurring part of human life. By picturing himself as one small part of a much bigger timeline, he was able to keep power, wealth, and even trouble in their proper place. This habit is especially helpful during high-stakes moments when emotions run high, like conflicts with loved ones, failures at work, or public mistakes. When you catch yourself reacting as if the world is ending, pause and imagine the scene from overhead. Place yourself in the bigger environment, maybe even at a distance of a few hundred meters, like looking from a tall building, or go even further in your head. Imagine the globe itself with all its ongoing activity. This shift won't erase disappointment or stress, but it stops them from taking over your whole identity. There is also an element of humility that comes from consistently practicing the view from above. When you put yourself in the middle of a world full of billions of people, all trying, failing, growing, and living, it gets easier to see that success and failure are shared human experiences. You are not alone, even in your lowest moments. Remembering that others have stumbled just as hard as you are stumbling today can make you feel connected, not isolated. No matter what's gone wrong, it is very likely someone else has been there before and found a way through to better times. Doing this doesn't mean ignoring responsibility or skipping out on learning from your mistakes. In fact, it makes it easier to act wisely and fairly because you aren't as trapped by panic or pride. When you view your setbacks as a normal, even expected, part of any full life, you're more willing to be calm as you figure out what comes next, instead of getting stuck in cycles of guilt or outrage. The emotional charge fades enough that you can actually use your earlier work, like journaling and reflection, to make a real plan for improvement or repair. This perspective can come in handy when dealing with criticism or misunderstanding too. Say you're criticized in public, or someone close to you says something harsh in the middle of a disagreement. The urge might be to defend yourself at all costs, replay the argument endlessly, or just feel deeply wounded. But if you step back and picture that moment from a bird's eye view, you see two people with their own histories, worries, and limitations, each handling things as best they can. What feels personal becomes more neutral, just another difficult moment in the huge network of daily human interactions that fill up every city. The view from above can even help with personal achievements and big wins, preventing you from getting carried away by pride. When something goes very well, a successful presentation, a big goal reached, public praise, it's easy to let excitement or confidence balloon out of proportion. Using this perspective keeps both successes and failures in balance. You remember that no single victory or loss defines you completely or forever. This helps you enjoy good moments but keeps you moving forward without getting stuck in old glories. It's not always easy to do this, especially if what you're facing feels really close to your heart. Some problems, loss, health scares, deep disappointments, carry so much weight that even the best perspective tricks can feel like they aren't enough. But even then, practicing the view from above can be grounding. If you can remind yourself, even briefly, that pain fades with time, or that billions of people have carried their own burdens before you, it carves out a little space to breathe and move. For those who struggle with anxiety or overthinking, this shift of focus can be especially powerful. When you start to spiral about what you said at a party, whether you did enough on a project, or if you're behind in life, this perspective acts as a mental reset. It interrupts the tidal wave of self-focused thoughts and pulls your attention outward to the bigger rhythms of life that continue no matter what has stressed you out. In daily practice, the view from above might be as simple as pausing before you send a stressed text, or before you say something you'll regret. Take a breath, picture the situation as one of many, and remember that in the larger scheme of things, very few problems are truly permanent disasters. You might even make a habit of reminding yourself each morning or evening that today's problems, frustrations, and even celebrations are just part of a much larger story. That kind of mindset helps you handle both upsets and good news with the kind of balance habits that leads to steadier confidence. By making this mental exercise part of your regular habit, you create a buffer against the impact of mistakes and setbacks. It turns out that most big failures seem smaller as you learn to place them in this wider landscape. The sting might still be there, but it doesn't spread and grow the way it does when you take things as the sum total of your whole identity. You see yourself as a work in progress, not someone defined by a single good or bad outcome. In practical terms, practicing this kind of mental zoom out aids your ability to make better decisions. When you see your choices, from how you react to someone else's words to how you handle a failed attempt, as just small parts in a lengthy timeline, it's easier to focus on what matters most in the long run. Instead of obsessing over short-term emotions, you can work on habits and responses that will make your life better for years ahead. This exercise is also an antidote to perfectionism because it becomes clear that very few things are going to play out perfectly or matter deeply many years from now. Many people who use the view from above technique report that it helps them let go of unrealistic expectations for themselves and others and approach every day with a little more kindness and flexibility. No matter what your routine is, there's usually a way to slip in this kind of perspective, especially when something feels like too much or too personal. Some find that walks, time outside, or just a quiet moment alone provide the right mental space to practice zooming out. Others set reminders on their phones or write a quick note to themselves when moods start to spiral. Over time, your brain starts to do it on its own. The automatic reaction to stress is less panic, more pause, and more space for a bigger, calmer view. One thing that comes from looking at things from above is recognizing the shared human experience of both joy and hardship. No person's life is free from troubles. When you remember that, you become both less self-critical and less self-obsessed. You see that everyone faces disappointments, misunderstandings, and setbacks, and you start to feel a kind of quiet solidarity with the rest of the human world, past and present. People who make a habit of this exercise end up with steadier emotional lives. They're not shocked by every turn of events, and develop a sort of flexibility that helps with nearly every part of life. When things go wrong, they move through the process a bit more calmly. When things go right, they enjoy them without getting lost in self-celebration. The result is a style of living that is less stressful, more focused, and equipped for surprise. Practicing the view from above is also a way to get perspective on your goals and ambitions. Sometimes the pressure to achieve can be just as stressful as dealing with mistakes or losses. When you imagine your life from a distance, what you'll remember in 10 years, what you'll wish you had spent your energy on, it becomes easier to choose your next steps wisely. You let go of trivial goals or worries and focus your best effort on what you'll actually value and remember in the long term. The benefits are cumulative. Each time you pull back from a stressful or consuming moment and look at it from above, you reinforce a mental habit that helps next time too. You waste less time tangled up in regrets or drama. That kind of time and energy savings adds up until one day you'll notice that things which used to throw you completely off balance now just bump you a little, if at all. For anyone going through tough transitions, loss, moving, breakups, changes at work, the view from above can be a lifeline. You remind yourself you're just moving through a chapter, not the whole book. This perspective means setbacks don't close you off from hope, but instead become something you can survive, adapt to, and work through, often with unexpected lessons and new relationships waiting on the other side. Staying grounded in this wide perspective doesn't mean you lose your drive or ignore what matters to you. On the contrary, it helps you set priorities based on the things that really count, dismiss things that are out of proportion, and bounce back from whatever the day brings. With regular use, practicing the view from above can shift your daily mood, boost your resilience, and keep you moving through mistakes, failures, and victories with the kind of even keel that's rare in today's world. This change in focus from the crisis of the moment to the sweep of your whole journey is a big part of what allows some people to keep going regardless of tough circumstances. It's not about denying reality or pain, it's about placing both in their true context. Step by step, shift by shift, this exercise works quietly alongside other habits like journaling and voluntarily facing discomfort, building a mind that's ready and able to take on whatever comes with a little more perspective, humility, and confidence each time. As you keep pulling back to see the bigger picture, it also becomes clearer that repeated setbacks or unexpected changes really test your ability to stick to your values and follow through on your plans. actions. That's when mindful self-discipline becomes one of the most practical tools you have. More than just willpower or saying no to temptation, this is about setting up the kind of daily structure and routines that make sticking to good actions and handling downturns almost automatic, even when life feels chaotic. Self-discipline might sound stiff or demanding, but in truth it's the opposite. It makes your days less stressful, your mood more consistent, and you're to move past failures more stronger. Mindful self-discipline starts with being clear about what actually matters to you. This means sitting down and deciding, sometimes in writing, the actions and attitudes that line up with your deeper purpose and goals. You are not trying to control everything that happens because, as you've probably realized, life throws the unexpected at everyone. Instead, you decide the kind of person you want to be and the habits that make you feel grounded, regardless of whether your plans keep working out. These might include basic but powerful things: keeping promises to yourself, eating well, moving your body, reaching out to friends, showing patience under pressure, or keeping your work or study up to date. Putting these intentions into daily routines takes away a ton of the stress that comes from being pulled by every emotion or external event. Think about how it feels when you wake up and already know the handful of things that always help you stay balanced. Maybe it's a quiet breakfast, a walk, a set time for reading, or ending your day by reviewing what went well and where you fell short. If you repeat these things day after day, they become part of you, not just ideas you hope to remember. This regularity gives you stability even on rough days, because you're not building your life around sudden bursts of motivation that come and go. A huge part of self-discipline is learning how to act in line with your values and long-term aims, not just reacting to whatever your mood throws at you in the moment. That could mean choosing to make progress on a difficult task before relaxing with entertainment, or sticking to a spending plan even when something shiny pops up online, or turning down invitations when you know rest or connection at home would be better for you. The key is not to seek out struggle for its own sake, but to consistently choose actions today that the future version of yourself will thank you for. Many successful people, whether they appear on magazine covers or simply bring calm to their families and workplaces, have figured out how to use self-discipline as a kind of silent foundation. They don't torture themselves with endless restrictions. Instead, they build a lifestyle where the right choice isn't so hard because it's the default. If you automatically lay out your clothes, prep your lunch, or shut off screens at a certain time, you don't use up mental energy on small decisions, leaving more focus for responding creatively to actual setbacks if they come. The mindfulness part is about bringing awareness to your behaviors instead of running on autopilot or acting out of pure habit. Rather than just checking off boxes to look productive or virtuous, you make a point of noticing why you stick to your routines, how they benefit you and others, and where you could adjust for real improvement. This reflection prevents your discipline from turning into an empty routine or a source of resentment. You might ask yourself each day or week, did I follow my plan because I care about my larger goals, or just because it's what I always do? This little check-in keeps your routines meaningful and prevents you from falling into mindless rigidity. There's also the fact that true self-discipline isn't about being harsh on yourself or swinging between extremes. It's less about punishing yourself for failure and more about gently steering yourself back to your intentions again and again when things don't go as planned. Some days you will skip a habit, lose your calm in traffic, or find yourself staying up too late. With mindful self-discipline, instead of quitting or criticizing yourself, you simply notice the slip and set a basic plan for how you'll get back on track tomorrow. This small dose of compassion lets you build resilience without getting stuck on any single misstep. In times of failure or big setbacks, self-discipline is often what gets you moving again, even when motivation is gone. If you're used to acting with intention every day, showing up, trying again, reviewing what happened, then one tough week or month doesn't break your whole routine. Maybe you limit how long you let yourself dwell on disappointment, or you put a safety net in place, like a simple evening ritual or morning walk that lets you ease back into normal routines after a tough spell. This is one of the ways discipline becomes a tool for recovery, not just productivity. Self-discipline also protects you from letting failure define your self-worth. When setbacks come, instead of thinking, I'm just not cut out for this, you can look at the small daily choices you've been making as evidence of your real effort and capability. It's easier to see each mistake or missed goal as feedback, something you'll use to improve your process. Over weeks and months, your routines document your progress way better than any single win or loss ever could. This approach is also about building up your self-trust. The more often you do what you say you will, especially when you don't feel like it, the more confident you become in your ability to face adversity. You start seeing yourself as the type of person who follows through, bounces back, and keeps growing, even if the road is rocky. This isn't pride or denial, it's the result of real evidence from your daily life, which shows up every time you stick with your plan on a tough day or get back up after an unexpected fall. An overlooked part of self-discipline is designing your environment to support good habits. If you know you have a tendency to snack mindlessly or skip exercise after work, placing reminders where you'll see them, prepping a healthier snack ahead, or setting out your sneakers the night before can make sticking to your intentions much easier. You're not making willpower do all the work. Instead, you craft your surroundings so that the right choice is clearer and takes less effort. Over time, you'll notice that you crave the stability of your routines, even if they looked like work at first. Self-discipline does not mean closing off pleasure or spontaneity. In fact, building reliable routines for chores and self-care often creates more free time and energy for fun, creativity, and rest. When you handle the basics smoothly, you're less likely to drop everything as soon as a problem comes along. You have bandwidth left to deal with challenges because you're not constantly playing catch-up or patching together last-minute fixes. With repeated practice, sometimes over years, sometimes in just a few dedicated months, discipline becomes less about force and more about flow. The more your positive routines are established, the smoother and less dramatic each day feels. When a big mistake happens or something unplanned derails your plans, you still feel it, of course, but you have a set of habits and standards to return to, kind of like a mental home base. Even if you need to take a break, switch something up, or downsize your goals temporarily, you know how to restart. It's also important to make room for rest and downtime in your routines. Self-discipline is not all about hustle. It actually requires you to give yourself time off, time to recharge, and permission to be human. Building in breaks, setting up clear boundaries about when to stop working, or even scheduling fun can be part of the discipline that keeps you healthy over time. By including both dedicated work and real rest, your motivation lasts much longer, and you avoid the burnout that leads to making the same mistakes over and over. Sometimes people get discouraged when discipline doesn't seem to pay off right away. Progress isn't always visible in days or even weeks. But when you look back after a few months of better routines, daily writing, regular movement, keeping your space organized, reaching out for support when needed, you see the difference in your attitude and your ability to weather change. Self-discipline is like building a foundation. It's usually invisible until a storm comes. If you're trying to work on your discipline, it can be really helpful to focus first on just one or two habits that matter most to you. Maybe it's going to bed at a set time, drinking more water, limiting distractions when working, or checking in with a friend every week. Track your consistency, but don't make it an all-or-nothing race. Small, repeated actions matter more than massive bursts, followed by collapse. Every time you keep your promise to yourself, even in a tiny way, you're proving to your brain that following through is possible even when circumstances change. When life feels especially unpredictable, disciplined routines help you find stability. If you're dealing with a breakup, a job loss, health changes, or even just a streak of bad luck, being able to fall back on basic routines like regular meals, exercise, or scheduled quiet time gives you something reliable. This steadiness lets you keep moving even when your feelings are all over the place. The goal isn't to ignore your emotions or the chaos, but to keep showing up for yourself through the tough spots. In social situations, self-discipline can show up in how you act under pressure, how you manage arguments, or even how you stick to your own standards when others are urging you to go along with something you don't want to do. If you've practiced keeping your word and setting boundaries with yourself, it gets easier to do the same in conversations and relationships too. People often respect those who remain steady and kind, even when disappointed or stressed, and this steadiness builds stronger connections over time. Modern distractions, endless scrolling, news cycles, and offers to buy or do more can erode discipline fast. Knowing this, building daily habits that unplug you, slow you down, and focus your attention pays huge dividends. Something as simple as 15 minutes of reading, a device-free walk, or a check-in with your values each night can interrupt the disruptors and keep you focused on what you actually care about. It's less about banning distractions completely and more about crowding them out with things that move you forward. For people who who are juggling a lot: school, work, caregiving, relationships. Mindful discipline helps keep the important things from sliding off the calendar. If you use reminders, lists, or shared calendars as part of your routine, you minimize the chance of letting other people down or missing commitments, because things get hectic, and when, inevitably, something falls through, your disciplined approach makes getting back on track much more straightforward. Over time, this kind of structure frees you from decision overload and emotional burnout. When your routines are well designed and balanced, you don't wake up every day wondering what to do or worrying about how to recover from the last failure. Even in a tough week, you know the basics will get done, and you have a way of measuring progress separate from outside approval or random events. This might sound subtle, but it's a huge boost to confidence and resilience. Ultimately, self-discipline isn't about acting like a robot or becoming immune to fun. Instead, it's your daily tool for building the life you want, getting through rough patches, learning from setbacks, and staying connected to what matters most. The more you practice it, flex it, and update it for your changing needs, the easier it is to move through failures with the same steadiness you bring to your routines. In a world where it's easy to get distracted, discouraged, or knocked off course, this steady, mindful self-discipline helps you steer your own story. No matter how many times you have to start over, it becomes more obvious as you develop steady routines and honor your commitments to yourself that day by day. Failure is less about falling down and more about finding out what really matters. But even so, there are still moments when things feel like they're falling apart, or perhaps you just can't see the point in trying again. Whenever setbacks pile up, it's extremely easy to focus only on what's missing or broken. At times like those, practicing gratitude might seem almost too simple, but it's actually one of the most effective ways to keep going and protect your mental strength from being washed away by disappointment. Gratitude, in this context, is not about pretending bad things never happen or forcing yourself to smile through pain. It's about intentionally taking note of people, experiences, strengths and opportunities that are still present, even when you're frustrated or feeling let down. When you do this regularly, especially after a tough day or a big failure, it shifts your attention away from constant what-if thinking or regret and starts to change the story you tell yourself about your own life. One way to see how this works is to pay attention right after a setback. Suppose you lose a contract, miss a deadline, or get tough feedback from a teacher or supervisor. The first reaction is usually disappointment, guilt, or anger. If you take even just a moment to mentally list what isn't lost, like your effort, your skills, the people who still support you, or even just the chance to try again, you create a small crack in the wall of negative feelings. That's the entry point for a more helpful perspective. You don't deny that something went wrong. Instead, you see that the setback is one event in a much bigger, ongoing process. Practical gratitude isn't about writing endless lists of blessings or putting up fake positivity. It's more about developing a habit of noticing, every single day, at least a few things that are working or that you can appreciate, no matter how small. It might be a family member who checked in, a good meal, a solution you found under pressure, or just the feeling that you handled a bad situation better than in the past. As you practice, you start to notice that your mind becomes quicker to spot these details, even during challenging periods. What many people discover is that a regular gratitude practice interrupts cycles of negative thinking. When something goes wrong, the mental habit is often to replay it over and over, or to focus on everything else that might go wrong next. If you pause and make a quick note, mentally or on paper, of something going right, something you have, or someone who cares, the story stops spiraling downward. You might still feel upset, but you don't get stuck in it for as long. That one moment of appreciation can be like a stepping stone out of a cycle that would otherwise keep you stuck. One area where gratitude makes a huge difference is in relationships. Setbacks at work or at home can make it easy to take your support system for granted, or even see friends and family as sources of stress. Turning your attention toward what you still have with them, or moments when they've shown up for you, strengthens those bonds and reminds you that you are not facing trouble completely on your own. Even a simple message of thanks or a quiet thought about someone's support can bring a new sense of possibility when you're feeling alone or discouraged. Gratitude also helps shift the focus from comparison, where you only see how you're lacking, falling behind, or struggling harder than others, to your own actual experience. It's easy to lose sight of progress or simple joys when you're looking at carefully curated images or updates from other people's lives. Regular gratitude brings your attention back to your own journey, and what's good right in front of you, which protects you from the discouragement that comes from comparing your tough moments to someone else's highlight reel. If you want to put this into practice, there's no elaborate process required. At the end of a rough day before you go to bed, try to think of 3 small things that brought you relief, showed your growth, or simply made the day a bit brighter. If you want to go further, jotting them down in a notebook, on your phone, or even sharing them with a friend can really cement the habit. Over the weeks, looking back over these notes is a concrete reminder that tough periods never erase every good thing in your life, even if it sometimes feels that way for a few hours or days. When you see tough times recorded right alongside moments of gratitude, you get proof that you can hold both pain and hope at the same time. The more regularly you practice gratitude, the better you get at spotting opportunities even within failures. Maybe a project fell apart, but you learned something important you couldn't have learned any other way. Maybe a relationship ended, but it freed up space and energy for you to build new connections or improve on something personal. You start to bridge the gap between seeing setbacks as endings and seeing them as turning points or transitions, an attitude that makes it easier to keep trying and less likely that you'll shut down when things don't go as planned. People sometimes worry that practicing gratitude will make them ignore problems, accept poor treatment, or lose their drive for improvement. But real gratitude is about balance, not denial. You still address mistakes, learn from feedback, and make changes when needed, but you do so from a place of inner security and hope. This makes you more patient in dealing with criticism or slow progress and gives you more power to act instead of just reacting. When your mind is trained to notice what's good even during hard times, you're better equipped to handle conflict, clarify what you want, and keep working on solutions instead of getting trapped in a victim mindset. One especially helpful effect of gratitude comes with setbacks that feel unfair or when you're dealing with circumstances outside your control. It's natural to feel frustrated or even angry at the world, a boss, or the economy when plans keep failing or someone else's decision blocks your way. In those moments, focusing on gratitude isn't about absolving others or pretending that injustice is fine. Instead, it's about not letting your sense of power or hope get completely swallowed up by what you can't fix. You might be grateful for your persistence, a single supportive voice, a small skill you're developing, basically anything that reminds you you're not powerless. Building this habit also helps protect your mental energy. It's exhausting to dwell only on what's lacking or broken. Most people have more resilience than they think, but they waste energy fighting or complaining about things outside their reach. When you focus on what you can still use, keep, or enjoy, you free up that energy for action, problem solving, or recovery. Even a 5-second pause to appreciate a warm drink, a good laugh, or a completed task can give your brain a break from endless, what went wrong thinking and gently steer you back toward progress. For people living with long-term challenges, chronic illness, personal loss, challenging work environments, gratitude can become a daily anchor. It doesn't cure pain or fix every problem, but it helps create a routine of searching for and naming what's still within reach, so that life isn't only about struggle. It might be the ability to get outside some days, understanding from a coworker, improvement in a small area, or something even more basic like sunshine or a good night's sleep. These moments won't erase difficulties, but they can keep you grounded when circumstances are unstable. Practicing gratitude can bring unexpected benefits in teamwork, business, or creative projects too. People who make a habit of acknowledging each other's efforts, even when things fall apart, foster a culture of trust and openness. When failure is met with thanks for effort and recognition of what went right, it lowers defenses, reduces blame, and encourages people to suggest solutions. Workplaces and families that regularly highlight what's working don't ignore problems, but they're better at facing challenges together without the additional baggage of resentment or distrust. The science behind gratitude is actually well established. Countless studies show that people who regularly practice gratitude, even in small doses, report less stress, fewer depressive symptoms, better relationships, and greater overall satisfaction with life. The benefits show up especially during difficult times because those who have built the habit are quicker to recover and able to put setbacks into perspective faster than those who don't pay attention to what they still have. Another thing that gratitude does is help you recognize your own agency. Setbacks can make make you feel passive, like life just happens to you. But when you name the good things, even ones you worked for, you remember that you're not totally at the mercy of events. Each small win or kind gesture is a way you've influenced your world, made a bit of progress, or kept going despite challenge. Over time, this sense of agency builds up, making you less prone to giving up when the going gets tough. It's important to note that gratitude is not always natural, especially when you're truly struggling. For many people, starting a practice of gratitude after failure feels forced, awkward, or even fake. The key is to keep it simple, honest, and regular. You don't have to be poetic or grand. Even one small line, like "I'm grateful for a chance to try again tomorrow," or "I appreciate that someone reached out today," works as a start. If you stick with it, the process gets easier. Your attention starts to shift, and good moments don't slip by unnoticed, even in periods of real stress. If you already keep a journal, adding a small gratitude section is a straightforward way to build the habit. Some people prefer sharing their thanks out loud with a partner, or sending a quick message to someone who helped, while others mark it quietly in their minds. There's no one right way, and what matters most is that you're training your awareness and shifting focus toward what's sustaining you this week or this day. Critics sometimes worry that focusing on gratitude downplays real issues or encourages putting up with the unacceptable. Again, the intention is balance. Gratitude isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about expanding your field of vision so setbacks aren't all you see. In fact, it often makes it easier and less emotional to address problems, because you come from a place where your worth and hope aren't tied to one outcome. In the end, what gratitude does is simple but powerful. It keeps opportunity and progress visible, even during storms. It's a habit that gently rewires your internal dialogue, making setbacks just a piece of the puzzle and not the whole picture. Instead of labeling yourself, your week, or your life as a failure because of one tough spot, you add context, reminding yourself that growth and good moments never disappear, even if they get buried in frustration or grief. This change doesn't happen after one list or one lucky day, but every small act of gratitude, especially right after a failure, makes bouncing back more natural next time. It becomes easier to keep perspective, move toward improvement, and invite help or new ideas in. Over time, gratitude becomes not just a tool for recovery, but a new lens for seeing setbacks as starting points instead of dead ends. When your days include a habit of noticing and appreciating the good, you develop a reservoir of hope and resilience. These are not just motivational slogans, but the ingredients that keep you moving when things seem stacked against you. Whether your setbacks are big or small, this mental habit works quietly in the background, redirecting negative cycles, keeping discouragement in check, and giving you a much stronger chance of using every day, including the hardest ones, to build a life that's rich in meaning and possibility. Staying focused on gratitude brings this powerful shift where you start seeing setbacks as chances to learn, not just reasons to feel defeated. Taking gratitude seriously can give you a cushion for those days when even your best routines and outlooks still leave you face to face with discouragement. But to really turn Stoic wisdom into something practical and ongoing, applying all these exercises as part of your regular modern life is what sets everything in motion. Instead of thinking about Stoicism as only an old set of ideas, this is where you test these habits in your own routine with your unique problems, relationships, and ambitions. Actually building your mental fortress, step by step, is about weaving these exercises into real days. Busy mornings, setbacks at work, moments of tension at home, or just back-to-back minor frustrations that stack up before noon. Modern life does not pause to give you space for reflection or improvement. Most people get up to alarms, check several notifications, race through breakfast, and are thinking about deadlines while their coffee is still brewing. This fast pace makes it easy to believe that you do not have time for self-mastery or reflection, but the truth is, Stoic practices fit even the craziest schedules if you start small. Where you find 5 silent minutes, you use them for negative visualization, picturing what could go wrong so you spend less time surprised or overwhelmed if it does happen. If you work in an environment where things constantly change, like sales, education, medicine, or hospitality, this daily dose of mental rehearsal gives you an extra layer of resilience. It means you step into each day prepared, more able to switch gears with less stress. A big part of this shift is personalizing the exercises. For example, someone leading a team might use the dichotomy of control during every project update, focusing only on what their team can do. and letting go of upper management decisions or customer preferences they can't change. A student can build voluntary discomfort by joining challenging study groups or tackling hard topics first thing every study session. If you work with your hands, maybe reflection comes in a 10-minute break at the end of your shift, where you write what went well, what went wrong, and what you actually learned. These are not glamorous habits, and nobody gets praised for them, but over months and years they change how much drama or panic you feel when things don't go according to plan. Journaling and regular honest assessment often become more important as you move up in your career or take on new responsibilities at home. If life is coming at you fast, reflection might mean just a few notes jotted on your phone about the morning's mistakes or a quick end-of-day voice memo to yourself. Taking even that much time pulls your attention away from blaming other people or luck and asks, what part of this can I own? What habit or decision do I want to adjust? Over repeated cycles, this is what forges a sense of agency. Even as life gets more complex, you keep seeing yourself as a participant, not just a victim of what happens. The view from above, too, finds a natural place in modern routines. If you work in a corporate office, find a park bench or ride public transit, just the act of pausing and mentally zooming out on the noisy moment changes its weight. That angry email, that awkward conversation, the unexpected bill, they shrink when you see them as one scene in a much longer film. With phones buzzing and opinions flying at you all day, the discipline of perspective keeping guards you against unnecessary emotional chaos. Mindful self-discipline keeps you consistent when motivation drops. Whether you are chasing running goals, launching a side business, or juggling care for aging parents and young kids, routines anchor you. This is truer than ever in a digital world full of distractions, shifting priorities, quick-fix promises, and pressure to do everything immediately. When you stick to daily habits that matter, planning out your day the night before, eating at regular times, showing up for meetings prepared, you protect your energy for real challenges, not just spinning your wheels on tasks that pop up out of nowhere. Voluntary discomfort is easier to practice now than it might seem. Maybe you push yourself to start the hardest conversation first thing in the day or walk to do errands instead of taking the car just out of habit. If your routine is all about convenience, small disruptions, like tech problems or schedule changes, can derail your mood fast. But when you've put in time to get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, even just by missing a favorite show for a day or skipping a snack, you get used to rolling with waves instead of waiting for perfect calm. All of these exercises blend naturally with gratitude, since each one, or even just remembering to use one in a hard moment, gives you a reason to note progress. For instance, when you journal after a bad week and see that you faced challenges instead of ignoring them, you can feel real appreciation for how much stronger you've become. The act of following through, especially when nobody is watching or rewarding you, is itself something to be thankful for. You might wonder how to fit all this in without it becoming one more thing on an endless to-do list. The secret isn't more work or higher standards, but integrating these habits into what you already do. If you run meetings at work, you can open with a short reflection. What's one thing you're grateful for this week? If you spend time commuting, use that space for the view from above exercise or plan your voluntary discomfort for the day ahead. Even time waiting in line becomes a mini check-in for what's inside your control and what isn't. A lot of people think self-mastery must mean radical life changes. In fact, Stoic habits often fit best into stable, simple structures. Home routines, like screen-free meals, regular phone check-ins with friends, weeknight walks, or setting a time once a week for honest reflection, work quietly in the background. When something goes wrong, the routines are there so you can return to them without making new decisions in a moment of stress. They function as a kind of mental insurance policy for rough days. Applying Stoic thought doesn't mean you freeze up emotionally or live without any spontaneous joy. If anything, small, steady routines of reflection, gratitude, and discipline leave more mental room for humor, connection, creativity, or fun. You become a little less worried about criticism or looking foolish, and much more curious about what you can learn when things go wrong. Over the long term, practicing these exercises as a group can make setbacks lose their destructive power. It's not that failing or being rejected ever feels good, but that feeling doesn't last as long or run as deep. You build a new story about yourself as someone who keeps trying, keeps learning, and keeps faith in the power of daily attention. Ongoing setbacks then serve as material for growth instead of reasons to quit or excuses to attack yourself and others. In a typical modern week, you might run into several disappointments before Wednesday afternoon. Projects fall through, emails are ignored, drivers cut you off, plans change last second. The mental fortress is not about becoming numb, it's about getting better at staying calm, seeing patterns, and experimenting with new responses. You see discomfort, criticism, or failure as part of the pattern, not a signal that something is wrong with you. This steadiness is what draws respect from teammates, friends, mentors, or even your kids. They see that you're not knocked off your values by a single bad day. It is natural for the urge to compare yourself to others to linger, especially with so many public measures of success posted online. When setbacks happen, it's easy to believe you're the only one who can't keep up, or to tell yourself harsh stories about your own abilities. Embedding Stoic exercises into your week keeps you focused on your own standards and progress, gently reminding you that nobody is measuring themselves by the out-of-context highlights others share. Your mental fortress grows each time you refuse to let outside signals tell you what matters. For real resilience, the key is not perfection, but persistence. Stoic tools aren't meant to eliminate emotion or guarantee fast victories. They are for getting through rough patches, for regaining composure after an awful meeting, a tough argument, or an unexpected bill. If you're wondering if you're making progress, look for signs like bouncing back faster after a bad day, apologizing sooner when you're rude, or starting a new project even after the last one failed. These are clear proof that you are building the habits of someone who uses setbacks as fuel for the next step. Sometimes applying these exercises in daily life is about looking back after a tough season, maybe after being laid off, ending a relationship, missing a big personal or financial goal, and seeing that you kept up at least one healthy routine, stayed open to feedback, or made space to reflect. Years later, those small habits are often remembered as turning points, not because they erased pain, but because they shortened the time spent stuck in it. This approach has ripple effects. When you live through regular setbacks with more evenness, people naturally lean on you for support. Kids notice their parents recovering from mistakes thoughtfully. Co-workers come to trust your outlook. Friends find it easier to be honest with you, even about their own failures. Communities built on these principles, honest about discomfort, disciplined about effort, quick to appreciate the good, are better at sticking together and finding solutions when times are tough. Modern life's unpredictability makes Stoic habits more relevant, not less. As plans fall apart, technology changes, or new demands arrive out of nowhere, the 8 exercises become a routine for both preparing your mind in advance and soothing it after the fact. You don't have to invest hours. Often just a few focused minutes here and there is enough to reset your attitude, spot a small win, and get back up for the next setback. Your own version of Stoic practice might include a quiet minute to think each morning, journaling after tough meetings, giving thanks before bed, or intentionally choosing one difficult thing every few days to strengthen your resilience. It might mean having real conversations about setbacks with someone you trust, or declaring a gratitude pause during tense moments. The form doesn't matter as much as the regular effort. Even if you are skeptical, it's worth experimenting. Try 1 or 2 exercises for a couple of weeks, tracking mood or reactions each day. Notice how you interpret mistakes, delays, or negative feedback after a little mental prep. If you see yourself moving past setbacks a bit faster, feeling less exhausted by criticism, or making more room for gratitude when plans get tough, that's a sign that the habits are working for you. Building your own mental fortress is not just about defense, it's about developing the strength to move through everyday life, its losses, delays, and even triumphs, with more intention, less reactivity, and much greater hope. The resilience that comes from disciplined reflection, daily gratitude, real acceptance, and honest self-renewal shows up quietly, changing how you react, relate to others, and keep trying even after another round of setbacks. Modern challenges are constant, but so is the chance to apply what works. Each time you practice one small Stoic habit, you give yourself, and often those around you, a little more strength to face the ordinary chaos of life. All those repetitions are what eventually turn knowledge into a real mental fortress, one built not out of old sayings but of choices you make, day in and day out, when it matters most. All those day-to-day routines and mindset shifts are what turn an old philosophy into something that's actually helpful, something you use, not just study. Most people don't realize how practical Stoic tools can become unless they fit them to real life. Unexpected layoffs, sudden health scares, missed goals, social conflicts, family stress, or just plain frustration from modern overload are part of daily experience now. The advantage of these Stoic exercises is that you gradually internalize them so that reacting to setbacks with a bit more self-respect and less panic becomes the normal way you handle things. This isn't about becoming cold or shutting down emotion. It's about becoming resilient, able to experience strong feelings, but not be consumed by them over and over. And when you start integrating these 8 Stoic habits, the process does not involve completely overhauling how you live or working up superhuman levels of Stoicism every hour. Usually it's about paying sharp attention to key moments, quiet times when you're aware of your thoughts or automatic reactions when you catch yourself spiraling. It could be a pause while brushing your teeth before bed, a silent minute at your desk before an online video call, or while you're waiting in the car. The key is making each exercise a routine part of your daily flow, not an afterthought for when everything is already in crisis. Over time, this approach makes a dramatic difference. The first sign is that you bounce back from small disappointments faster. Arguments or missed opportunities sting for a day, maybe, but not for weeks. That alone frees up energy for more important work and makes relationships smoother. The negative visualization, for example, takes only a few minutes but sets your expectations so everyday frustrations lose their sting. Instead of feeling crushed when things go sideways, you tend to think, I saw that coming, I know what my options are. If you're someone who has struggled with chronic anxiety or feels easily overwhelmed, this alone can change the tone of your whole week. School setbacks, workplace snags, repairs that take longer than expected. These things still require effort, but they do not dominate your emotions or wreck your self-image. The relief that comes from knowing you can handle both little and large setbacks is something most people only appreciate after it's missing. Using the dichotomy of control isn't about letting go of all ambition or becoming passive. It's about daily discernment. When news breaks that ruins your plans or a relationship hits a breaking point, you ask yourself, what here is actually under my control? That way, you waste less time on social media debates or worrying about other people's judgments and spend much more attention on how you will respond, what your next step will be, and what you can learn or repair. This refocusing makes progress real and personal. It's not about waiting for permission or for perfect conditions, but making the most of where you are. Embracing voluntary discomfort, though it looks small, slowly changes your comfort zone. The effect is that you can face unpredictable days on little sleep, with missed meals and old frustrations, and still stay composed rather than grumpy or resigned. Commuters, parents, shift workers, professionals, students, anyone can apply this. It becomes part of character, strong yet flexible, ready for inconvenience and less likely to give up. It even encourages you to try more new things because you're less scared of looking foolish or hitting rough spots. The habit of journaling and honest reflection makes you your own best source of feedback. You end up noticing how your moods fluctuate, where you repeat the same mistakes, and what responses help most. Sometimes you'll spot a habit of self-criticism that ramps up after tiny failures, which you can address more kindly once it's visible on paper. Even for those who never liked writing, using an audio message or quick list can accomplish the same thing. Reflection weakens the idea that failures have the last word and builds up patterns of learning, adjustment, and ongoing action. With the view from above, perspective becomes easier to access even in stressful interactions. Instead of piling every new problem on your back, you remember, actually, this is a pretty small blip. There were setbacks last year that seem invisible today. Groups at work perform better when members can see stress in context. Parents are more patient with kids. Partners forgive each other a little faster, because the drama does not become the sum total of the relationship. Self-discipline, when practiced mindfully, does not mean being rigid or controlling. It's regular check-ins, finding what helps, and adjusting as needs, seasons, or circumstances change. When you recognize routines as support systems rather than punishment, you end up having more energy to help others, finish projects, and get through rough patches without burning out. Daily repetition of small actions, enough sleep, consistent meals, pausing before reacting, turning off work at a certain hour, adds up to big reliability in the face of life's regular chaos. Practicing gratitude isn't about faking happiness. It's a practical method for evening out emotional swings, especially when plans don't work. Noticing small wins, keeping track of supportive conversations, or naming moments of kindness helps your brain stop looping on negative outcomes and start looking for possibilities inside every problem. Over time, gratitude becomes a habit that naturally lowers stress, brightens perspective, and helps you see setbacks as survivable. The secret to making all of this sustainable is that you tailor these exercises to your own challenges and strengths. For instance, if negativity hits hardest in the morning, you use the first 10 minutes to reflect, get perspective, or focus on what you can control before diving into obligations. If you tend to get discouraged by midday, keep a physical reminder handy, a note, a mantra, a photo that you associate with a gratitude pause or a shift in perspective. When difficult situations tend to happen at work or with family, build reflection into the end-of-day routine. Tying each STOIC exercise to moments you reliably encounter ensures you use them, even when your energy or motivation is low. It also works to teach or model these habits for others. If you're a coach, mentor, or parent, walking through these practices out loud, planning for setbacks, pausing before reacting, naming what is and isn't in your control, creates a kind of cultural reset wherever you are. Teams that use these ideas find smoother conflict resolution and real progress, not because they avoid mistakes, but because they know how to recover and try new things. Families or communities focused on these daily practices approach each challenge with a kind of relaxed determination, ready for improvement. Another major point is that you don't have to use every STOIC habit at once or keep them all going perfectly. Life is unpredictable. Sometimes you will drop routines, forget habits, or realize that your priorities have changed. This is normal. What matters is having the tools ready to pick up again when things settle, or even while things are still messy. Legacy and progress are built by what you do over the long haul, by what you return to repeatedly, not what you do during a perfect week. Many modern success stories quietly use these kinds of methods behind the scenes. Artists who spend years getting rejected build mental discipline so they become immune to the sting of no. Entrepreneurs expect projects to fail and have practical techniques for reflection, gratitude, and pivoting their efforts. Healthcare workers who have to start over each day after difficult shifts lean on routines and perspective keeping to avoid burnout. Parents weather the roller coaster of sleepless nights, illnesses, and uncertainty with reflection, realistic expectations, and gratitude for progress. In all of these cases, resilience is not something a person is born with. It's actively built by living these habits through the ups and downs. There's also something freeing about seeing failure as just a regular feature of the landscape, not a sign that your story is broken. With practice, most people discover that making it through setbacks is not about always winning, but about using each moment, good or bad, to reinforce the habits that matter. If you keep up these small, purposeful routines through turbulence, you notice a shift. The lows don't last as long. There's less shame about needing help or asking questions. There's even a quiet pride in being the kind of person who keeps perspective and keeps showing up, even after being knocked down. As the weeks and months pass, you'll see these STOIC habits shaping not just your reactions, but your relationships and your view of the future. Instead of dreading problems, you begin to anticipate and prepare for them. Instead of resenting criticism or delays, you're more open to learning. Instead of fearing what you can't control, you come to accept it with greater calm and turn to what you can do with what's left. Even small changes, applied repeatedly, snowball into better moods, more creative solutions, deeper relationships, and real momentum. Cultivating this kind of mental fortress doesn't mean your life becomes safe from chaos, but it means that setbacks trigger less fear, rejection feels less personal, and every disappointment becomes one more practice session in resourcefulness and emotional steadiness. No matter how much change the world brings or how uncertain the future looks, these habits ground you, the tools sharpen with use, and your ability to step back, reset, and respond grows stronger. Some people find it useful to revisit these STOIC exercises on a regular schedule, maybe a monthly check-in or a quarterly reset. You might ask yourself what exercise you've neglected, which ones helped most, or where a new routine could make upcoming challenges easier. This is where you adjust, swap out, restart, or deepen your practice. Think of it like tuning up a car or changing filters in your home. Maintenance, not overhaul. Of course, there will be seasons when even your best routines feel dull or don't bring quick results. That's to be expected. Progress doesn't always show up as big wins. Sometimes it just means less chaos or a shorter recovery time after something goes wrong. When you look back at a tough year and see that you're still showing up, still choosing growth, still resetting according to your values, you're seeing the effects of this mental fortress in action. If you're sharing a home or workspace with others, the benefits multiply. Kids learn how to manage feelings and recover from social wounds. Partners grow more patient, friends become more open about their struggles, and even professional teams find more creative solutions after setbacks. Organizations that quietly promote reflection, perspective, gratitude, and honest effort end up more innovative and less brittle over time, not because of luck, but because failure just feels less threatening. The most encouraging part of Stoic resilience is that anyone can start building it at any time, regardless of past experiences. You don't need to have read every philosopher or even called yourself a Stoic. You only need to make the decision, once and then again, to focus your effort on routines and responses that build you up rather than break you down. The world will keep bringing change and challenge. Your job is to keep using your habits, even small ones, to stand a little steadier each time. Ultimately, the legacy of people like Marcus Aurelius and the Stoics is not that they never felt pain or disappointment, but that their habits let them keep leading, loving, learning, and building despite losses. That's available to you too. Once you recognize that setbacks are not a personal curse and that self-mastery is the result of continued small choices, you can let go of perfectionism and panic. Every week becomes another opportunity to reinforce the habits that keep you going. It's hard to measure in only days or even months, but over years these routines and perspectives accumulate. People around you notice a steadier tone. New challenges are met with less dread. Failures are addressed faster, and even risks that don't work out are less frightening because your habits have made you self-sufficient and adaptable. There is deep value in knowing that good days and bad days are both useful and that your tools are ready whenever you need them. In the end, turning Stoic exercises into daily routines is about much more than handling failure. It's about preparing yourself for the next test, the next chance, the next time you want to start again without feeling buried by fear or exhausted by lost momentum. By putting these exercises into regular use, you give yourself and those around you a kind of inner wealth. This is a resource that no setback can take away and that keeps growing year by year as you keep exercising the principles in both calm and chaos. That is how you truly build a mental fortress for the challenges and opportunities of any era.